I know you're in your final hour here.
Not quite.
We're going to miss you. But if you could leave us one thing, we will still be here and we will still be coming back. And if you could leave us with supporting the full suspension of Measure S, that would be amazing. And Supervisor Bone, I feel we have your support. You're an ag man, and like Dylan spoke, I too work with the same trucker that brings us the manure. I like to think that we're biology farmers. We grow microbiology in our farm, and the cannabis is a gift of that. Even one of the inputs we bring in, and probably the largest input we bring in 2 squeeze of hay. That's about 120 bales. That has gone up $4. So we too are ag people.
Craig, I'm
Thank you.
so sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? All right, well, we are back to the board. Anyone want to take a stab? I mean, thank you for all the public comment. I mean, that's pretty awesome. Yes, Supervisor Bone.
Well, I guess I was the one that wanted the full suspension last year. And I don't have a problem asking for it again this year. And I realize it costs us money. But I also realize the basis of the tax was, and don't take this wrong, you guys were a biggest part of it as we were, because you were excited about being legal and you were willing to accept anything. And we went big. And and it wouldn't have been a problem if we didn't have 100,000 pounds coming in from Oregon across the border. We didn't have 1,200 illegal dispensaries in LA today that nothing's being done about. If we didn't have some of that overload coming down and the black market, we wouldn't be in that situation. And I appreciate everybody that has taken a stance. We are the preeminent place for cannabis, and it's upgraded to just having the best pot around, back in 2012 to now we're elite and everything else. But we are, because there are so many people in the market. I was kidding. Eddie Crandall's a supervisor down in Lake County, and they just approved a 100-acre field. And I said, when you go anywhere, even Amsterdam, nobody walks in and asks, do you have any of that Lake County stuff? So, I mean, we do have, and we have lived by that name. Are we getting to where everybody wants it to be? I don't know if we're getting there, but the guys that are hanging on so far, you guys are the good operators. You have done. Where you can dig ponds, you've dug ponds. Where you're doing rain catchment, you're doing rain catchment. I've been fortunate to have been to quite a few of your farms. I know how hard you work. I don't know what a 2-year suspension looks like. I don't know if we can get rid of it permanently. Or a 4-year suspension. I mean, till we get out of this, and then we look at, I can't suspend it all the way right now, or I don't feel right, because it may come back. We don't know that. But, and I'd like to bank that it's coming back, and then we relook at the tax, because as you've said, you guys want to be part of this. But if we follow what the state's done, the state did stop their cultivation tax, and now they're going to tax it. I think distributorship, there's a whole different formula, so it's not on your back. And we've taken a lot of people that are caretakers of the land and have done a very good job of it, have done it their whole lives, and have taken it one step farther. And it's kind of funny is 6 years ago when it was becoming legalized, I had so many people saying, it doesn't affect me. Those same people are going today, says, I didn't realize it affected me so much. The trickle down is immense, much like the timber industry. So the trickle downs are, so could we do a 4-year suspension and then come back and look at this? I don't know what we can do about the past taxes, because taxes have been paid. I don't know how any of that works, and I don't know. We'll have to have your fees, everything else as you do everything else. But it's again, there's this looming, and Craig, thanks for bringing it up. This ordinance is coming out, so the expansion anyway is kind of looking, nobody's going to do anything for a while. So I don't know how we get there. I don't know how we do that. I think we've gotten a good chunk of your hide the last 6 years, and I think we need to realize that because we've got a lot more of it than any other county in the state. So as we move forward, I don't know if this is feasible. I don't know. I would toss that out there until we see a recovery date, and they are dropping like flies. I can tell you, I get a lot of phone calls. I see a lot of people, having to give up their properties that they've had for years or selling what they have at a much reduced rate to get out from underneath it. So I don't know if this other 15% will help, but I don't know if we're going to get much of that 15% anyway. So I don't know what the loss is going to be if we don't take a vote of confidence in this segment of our economy. And it's not because it's cannabis or anything else. This is a segment of our economy, and we're helping out a segment of our economy, and that's kind of the way I look at it.
All right, so I am going to ask Supervisor Madrone not to pick on you or anything, but since you're not here, I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to make comment. Is that no? All right, I'm taking that as a no for the moment. Supervisor Wilson, any thoughts or questions? Or yeah.
I have a couple thoughts, and then we can kind of get into the meat of it. I mean, so, yeah, I've been here a while as well and lived through some of this. I want to say that, the economy that people are harking back to with relationship to cannabis was based on prohibition. And it had impacts outside our community. I know we like to speak about the helicopters, which I lived through. I was there. And the paramilitaries and the abuse by, frankly, some local enforcement and others, which I was there. And I saw that all. But I have to say the pricing that it was allowed people to grow this industry was based on prohibition that impacted communities across the United States. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And I think that some of the disappointment and where we're at with relationship to this too is the expectation of different forms of prohibition, whether it be a 1 acre cap or whether it be product moving in from Oregon or these other things. It's like it's still all forms of gradations of regulation, which is ultimately some forms of prohibition, and we're losing that battle, I guess you'd say, in terms of being able to hold on to some of those things for pricing. And so we've hit it's brutal for folks trying to grow plants in these environments under these conditions, whether regulatory issues associated with impacted watersheds and all these other things that we have here, but then the regulations around testing and all those other things. It's just very complicated and moving faster than people's ability to adjust to some of those things. When we're going in speaking about Measure S, Measure S, Supervisor Bone is correct in that there was some some enthusiasm and adoption with relationship to the growing community associated with Measure S, but ultimately it was the rest of the community that elected to do it. It was an initiative process, or not initiative, but it was put on the ballot anyway. And so I have to say, it's like I haven't heard. I've heard of mostly from the growing community and a few ancillary folks, but in general, I just haven't heard like the the body politic that elected to put this on the ballot or elected to have it move forward, I'm not hearing from them necessarily like we need to remove this. This is really important, and yet that's the constituency ultimately that we are answering to. That being said, I mean, if they don't feel like it affects them directly, are they calling me? No, that's just not how it works. So I think the people who are feeling the most pain with relationship to the ones here that we're hearing from today. I have a few issues around the sort of the disparity of who's paying these taxes and who's not paying the taxes. And I hear that 50% of the, more or less, are just not paying it and don't have the ability to pay, under the assumption they don't have the ability to pay. Then there's 50% who are paying the tax, and we've heard that 18 paid in full without even taking the 85% reduction by mistake, which makes one wonder. There must be a few folks doing well enough to pay taxes, and so there's disparity, I think, within the industry about who the costs. I mean, some people have their land and paid off, and some people don't, and some people have, there's a lot of disparity in what the costs of doing business are. Some people are in locations that don't have long distances of bad roads. Some people have great roads. Some people have, whatever it is. It's like there's just so much disparity in that I think that's something that is not really fleshed out. And also, I'm not clear as to whether we're talking tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. We sort of just dropped that the last time with relationship to, well, it just seems simpler just to do everybody under one umbrella. But I'm wondering, what are the default rates with relationship to tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3? Like, are we having no defaults on tier 3, but all defaults on tier 1? And I was just I'm wondering about that, because we've talked about the relative impacts or not impacts associated with this that's why we created the tier system. We're not going to talk a lot about, I think there's suggestion of separating out the trellis stuff. I don't think we have the bandwidth today to kind of get into trellis. It just seems to me, although there's a lot of things I really like about trellis, and I think we can improve upon, and some of the ideas with relationship to the microgrants and the marketing and the tourism and the genetics auction is intriguing to me, and I think that would be pretty. I think there's something there. I've actually experienced Beaujolais Nouveau in France, and I've been to some of these events, and they are draws, and they do have and actually Fashion Week in Paris, and so they have their own thing, but and I think Humboldt can really leverage that, but we have to have people actually here, producing to do that, and I think that we're having we're having a cataclysmic event around that. So those are my thoughts on this. I guess the other part I want to get back to is with regards to Measure S. There was a thought, there was a lot of requests about, the money going back to the growers in particular. And again, the language around it when it was put in, when we had an election about it, wasn't about it going back to the growers. It was about it going to the entire community without that, except for maybe something like the Trellis Project. And then also, we can't get rid of Measure S because it was voted in by the voters. We can lower the tax down to zero, but any vote of the board in the future can then raise it back up to whatever those full amounts are. We just can't. It is still, Measure S will still exist. We don't have the power to remove it. So, with that, I'm interested to hear what Supervisor Madrone has to say.
I think. Yeah. Did you have more?
No, that's good for now.
Okay. Yeah, I heard Supervisor Bone mentioning suspended. You're saying we could go down to zero. I think that, yeah, we can.
We could. That's
if that is what we choose.
That's not my intention right this moment.
And I did once again want to give an opportunity for Supervisor Madrone. I want to make sure we have 4 of us. I'm not sure. Just let me know you are there.
I am here.
Okay, good. So let us know. Did you want to add anything yet, or are you still just listening?
No, I think we've had a lot of good listening, a lot of good comments, stories, and other presentations about real life impacts. Change brings adaptation, right? We know that. And drought is certainly causing us to shift a lot of things. Market supply, plenty of talk about that. PG&E's presentation this morning, even if you want it, the electricity may not be there unless you produce it yourself through solar, wind, or small hydro. So there's a lot of change happening. And, the old adage, you can't squeeze blood from a turnip. Well, we'll just say you can't squeeze blood from a bud. Let that be a quote for the day. So I've thought a lot about all of this, and I'll just cut right to the chase. I would support what I like to call 100% tax reduction rather than 0% payment. Let's call it 100%. I could support that in this situation. I believe that Supervisor Wilson is right. We don't have the authority to get rid of Measure S. That would have to be something, I believe, put on the ballot, and the voters would have to make that decision. But I could support 100% tax reduction at this time. I know it's a hassle to come back every year. We could consider doing it for 2 years. As much as I'd love to see the industry come back like tomorrow, and I'm sure all the rest of you would, I doubt that's going to shift very much until there's federal legalization. And even then, there are lots of questions out there about what will that mean, what will change, what won't change, et cetera. I do think the late fees are problematic. They just keep compounding. And as some said, these unpaid taxes and late fees may very well be on farms that are no longer in operation whatsoever and didn't even ask for fallowing. They're just out of the business. And all of these changes are creating its own fallowing, so to speak, in regards to the farmers. And that's a sad thing. But this happens in all industries over time where changes do separate folks out. And I very much appreciate those dedicated Humboldt County locals who are in it for the long haul. They've invested everything they've got. They're trying to make this work, and I hope we can turn that corner and bring back a day when it can still provide families with an income on their farms, doing regenerative farming, in the sun. If you can't PG&E, in the old days, it was all just done in the sun, right, folks? Remember? And a lot of you do that now. I know you do, as well as being grown in the ground with regenerative practices for the soil, rather than buying and dumping soil away every year, which is kind of a crazy thing that happens out there. Not by the regenerative folks, so that's for certain. And the storage and forbearance, if you can't get a hold of a geologist and get a water report, hydrologic connectivity issue dealt with, then water storage and forbearance is the pathway forward with that. I also like Trellis. I think it's been a great program. I hope we have more of it and can have another discussion another day about how to actually revitalize that and help it move into marketing appellations. It was mentioned genetics are huge, and they are. It all began here in many ways in Humboldt. We all know that. We have tremendous genetic strengths, and I like seeing some of the appellations, the Origins Council, and other efforts that are being made to try and protect those incredible genetics here from Humboldt County. It does seem like it would be useful to have a payment plan method if we could figure that out. As was mentioned by several farmers, they often find themselves where they could make a partial payment, but because it won't be accepted, they move on to dealing with other things. So let's get that set up so we can allow people to get caught up in current. I do think the state has a big role in all of this. Following, we've been asking for it. I'm going to keep asking for it. It is absolutely an important piece to this. But also, as was mentioned, tax waivers for water storage. And it should be for anybody that wants to store water, because we're all going to be doing it sooner than later, collecting rainwater off our roofs. And why shouldn't we provide tax waivers for those property improvements, as well as grants, not just for cannabis, but for organic food, growing, and all kinds of other things. So I think we've got a lot of work to do at the state level, the local level. And then, of course, as I mentioned with federal legalization, and some changes at the state, I think we all are looking forward to the day when there's going to be able to be direct sales for farmers at farmers markets, along with canna tourism, like Johnny Casale's been able to do out there on the Breslin Road. Congrats to you, Johnny, for all your hard work. But it wasn't easy dealing with ADA and all kinds of other restrictions, so we need to make that more durable. And with federal comes cost-effective banking and writing off your expenses, like when you have smoke damage to your crop or a fire or mites or any number of other crop dilemmas. Would it be wonderful if you could write those expenses off and actually have insurance like every other ag commodity in the country. So a lot of work to do in all these arenas, both locally, state, and federally. And I appreciate our comments today, and I would support 100% tax reduction, at least for 1 year, if not 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Madrone. Supervisor Wilson, you said you had some more questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering, there was a comparison with relationship to other counties, and with relation to tax structures. If we were to suspend this tax temporarily, even would we be the only county in California to completely suspend a cannabis tax at this point?
As far as I'm aware, yes, but we can confirm that if you want us to look a little bit deeper at it. But at this point, at least in this area, that those counties that have put in place a cultivation tax, yes.
Mm-hmm. And a payment plan, is that something that staff can deal with in terms of?
It has been talked about several times.
Okay.
Yeah, the treasurer tax collector and I have been working with CSAC Finance Corp., who brought us Easy Smart Pay to offer payment plans on our property taxes. They're not quite prepared yet to offer that to cultivators, but we are pressing them to try to put a program together. Humboldt would be the trailblazers in that, and there are some intricacies to it, but we're definitely working on that.
And let's see, it sounds like Scott Adair, and we might be bringing back trellis, it sounds like, and I'm not feeling like, are you guys feeling like we're going to get any direction today from?
Do you think we have much brain space left, is what you're trying to say?
We have some other stuff to do, and I was just kind of wondering about, like, whether, it just seems like the
I think I'm hearing him ask if maybe you would be willing.
We can bring something back.
Okay.
It sounded like maybe marketing, tourism, genetics.
Yeah.
We can bring some ideas as to how trellis could evolve to support that.
Okay, I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thanks. And then the last thing is maybe this is a time, if depending on, it seems like, again, I personally am not excited about the idea of the complete elimination or the suspension of this tax, but I also want to recognize that the tax structure is awkward and clunky, and it was, maybe we just weren't doing it in a way that makes it, because what I was saying, there's disparity on who can pay these taxes, but the structure itself isn't very good at accommodating with relationship, because it's more so I think we should be looking to other counties maybe for a structure that works better, so that if there's success, the county gets some success, and where there's not success, we're not like extracting blood from a bud, as Mr. Madrone said. So it may be incumbent upon us to write something or put forward an alternative initiative, or not initiative, an alternative ballot measure that would actually just redo this so that it's just more functional. I'm finding the one that we have now just doesn't work very well. It doesn't seem fair. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So.
And I think that has come up before too, that conversation about revising the current tax structure, but it would, as I understand it, would have to go back to the voters.
Yeah, I mean, and our board could put something forth to the voters as an alternative, as opposed to what we have here, because the taxation in and of itself of this industry, albeit not very popular in this room, was overall popular with the the county in its population, at least at that time. This, and so I want to be recognized that is true, and somehow maybe we can, as a board, take responsibility to adjust to make something that works, that brings those two things closer together. Thanks.
Supervisor Bone?
And I understand what Supervisor Wilson's doing, but the reason is we're taxing a business. And some of those businesses are taking place on leased land. Some people are working on lands that they bought at an inflated price. Some are working on land they've owed that's paid for. And so now we go back farther. This is why some small grocery stores stay open and some don't, because they just can't compete anymore because they can't afford the price of doing business. Now, the price of doing business here and here are the same. It's just how well they manage it. And I don't know how we take a tax and adjust the tax and say, well, you're not doing as good as this guy's doing, so we're going to reduce the tax more. I'm not understanding what the levels, if we don't do it the same across the board. And
Can I answer that? I'm not trying to adjudicate that today, and I'm not saying all one tax structure is perfect. I'm just saying we can do better. That's all.
I'm not saying it's perfect either, but it's a tax structure. So the minute you say tax and perfect are two words that never go together anyway. So, and as we move forward, it comes to mind that are we the only ones in the state that are going to dismiss the tax altogether? Well, some people aren't charging a tax, but are we the only ones? Well, I think if we sit here approximately 6 years ago, we can sit here and say, we're the only county in the state that imposed a tax. Nobody else had imposed a tax, but Humboldt was first. So maybe Humboldt is leading, and they led the charge, and a lot of people followed. Maybe this will help the California cultivators across the board, and it's at the same time, we talk about incentivizing, we talk about all this stuff we've got to do at the state level. We got to quit bringing stuff in, illegal dispensaries. We have to if you want to make the market fair, then the ones that are still, they're still going to pay taxes. They're going to pay taxes at the distributor. They're going to pay taxes at the dispensary. So it's not like anybody's getting a free ride. So as we look at this, and if we're going to be industry leaders, and we're the only county in the state doing this, again, we were the only county in the state that imposed a tax, and everybody followed. So I'd like to make a motion that we, and if we can, and I'm not sure if are we going to bring the penalties back penalties and late fees back? Is that what you're
That was
talking
my
about
question.
doing?
I wanted to ask before you made a motion. I'd like to know
That's what I'm asking before I make a
what
motion.
happens to what we've already have outstanding is what I have written down that I'd like to know about. And what were you saying?
Well, what I'm saying, if we're going to come back and do that, I will still take the motion to suspend, because there's a certain measure of sanity for some of the operators out there that want to know. We've already got the ordinance that the Neyland folks have brought, but there's a certain amount of relief of pressure saying, okay, I've got 2 years to operate better, to get stronger, to market my product better, and with the help of the trellis coming back later, we can use that marketing monies and things like that, with the caveat that you come back and figure out a payment plan for penalties. And it's going to be hard to suspend the penalties or relieve them because a lot of people have paid them. So it's really going to create a situation. We're moving from here. We can't. It's hard to go backwards. I've been told. I did ask that. So we'll see what they can do on the penalties and that. But from here going forward, I'd like to suspend. I've said 4 years, but it sounds like it's going to be 2 years is what the consensus is, and I'm not going to buck the trend. But we suspend the Measure S tax for 2 years.
Is there a second to the motion? Supervisor Madrone? Sounds like you kind of were. I wasn't thinking there was a consensus on 2 years. I know there was discussed with two of you, and I was thinking one. But anyway, Steve, did you want to second the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. So now we can talk about it more. Supervisor Wilson, you. It's your turn. Yeah. No, I can see suspending. I was thinking a year, just from the standpoint, I have to admit, I hear from all of you. My district certainly overwhelmingly supported it because there's no cultivators, except for someone in the audience who lives near me might be in this audience. So, but for the overall, overwhelming majority, is not a popular thing because last time we did this, my phone went crazy. Everyone else has got good calls, and I was getting the angry calls. You too? Okay. But I do understand there's extraordinary circumstances. I'd be more comfortable with consideration about 1 year, but I would like to know about the past, what hasn't been paid, what's going to come back to us, and I don't know if we're really ready. And one of the other reasons I'm not really hot on doing 2 years is I recognize that my time here is short, even though some days feel longer. And but at that same thing, I'm only here for a short period of time now, so I don't want to make big decisions for others who come behind me to have to go and kind of clean up, if you know what I mean. So I would just be more comfortable with 1 year, but I'm happy to have the conversation because I'll probably be the one that has to be in the middle again. I'm used to that. Yes, sir. Supervisor Bone.
It's not that I wouldn't be happy with one. I'd be happier with two for the basic reason we're looking at people. And it's not just the cannabis growers. We just heard, I know the truck driver he's talking about. He just doesn't have enough business to keep him going. He will next year because he'll go find something else to do. But he was, planned on doing something else, and everybody's. So 2 years gives them time, gives them next year to get going and make the investments that they, instead of paying us, that they would be doing, gives us time and gives us 2 years to come back and look at. Hell, in 2 years, we may not have anybody here that cares. In all honesty, we may not have. So I think I'm not trying to give the money away. I'm not trying to give money away. I don't like taxes, but I know that's what we live and die on here. I was excited to give the biggest raises we've ever given in the history of Humboldt County over the last 3 months. So with that being said, the reason I want to go 2 years is they have the cloud of the ordinance that's coming over them, and I think this gives them time to. I think this gives them time to regroup, look where they're going, have an idea where the market's going, work with Trellis. You can't turn a ship this big around in a year. It's not going to change in a year. You need 2 years to make something happen, because I can tell you what, I can remember what we were doing last year up here at this time, and half of it probably isn't implemented if you want to go through the record. So I'm just saying I think 2 years is a number that they can work with, we can work with, the CAO's office can work with, very reluctantly because I keep getting dirty looks. But I think we can make this work for all parties involved. And 57% of the people I think in Humboldt County voted for it's more like 63% voted for the tax. I remember 2016. Everybody wanted to tax the hell out of the growers. They were tired of the grow dozers. They were tired of all the crap. They were tired of all that and everything else. The herd's been thinned. We've got some good quality people out there farming. And I think as we go forward, I think it's important we show them support. I think it's the right thing to do. And I can tell you, we just did a thing with the dairy farmers. I got my rear end handed to me by the dairy farmers. When are you going to give me some money back? But we don't charge them a separate agricultural tax that we don't charge anybody else. And we're not taking any of the land tax, any of the other taxes and giving back to them. We're taking a tax that we imposed, we created, and we charged them. So that's why I think it'll take 2 years to get this worked out. And in 2 years, this may have been a horrible experiment. I hope for their sake it's not. I hope for our county's sake and the businesses it affects, it's not.
Supervisor Wilson?
Again, as someone who's not necessarily supportive of this, I do think that the board goes forward with a suspension, as Supervisor Bowen has suggested. I do think 2 years is a reasonable amount of time, mainly because it's just disruptive to like come back and do this every year like this, and it's disruptive to the flow of the way things are, and it's just. I also have, from it, the question of reducing this tax anymore, other than going down to zero, means that I want to make sure we at least have a cost savings in administering. So, like, if we don't have anything to collect, then the only administration we're going to have is on payment plans. It seems like, in terms on our side, unless we have other. Will we have other overhead associated with this?
We still do have multiple tax years outstanding, so we still have past due amounts that go all the way back. Obviously, they've been getting bigger as you go, so there's still some administration there. And then, of course, late fees and penalties. And ideally, I think folks would start, whether it's through the payment program that we possibly bring back, or just trying to pay down these amounts. If they're really, truly staying in business, they're going to want to, and they're going to need to pay down the past due amounts.
Right.
And so there'll be some administration there, but it'll be much smaller. We won't be sending out the tax bills twice a year to every single person, and then the follow-up to those.
And then to the motion maker, there's a few. It seems like there's a few just cleanup directions to staff as part that you could make as part of the motion, which is to bring back the trellis discussion for a later date.
I thought if it wasn't included, it had to come back. Because I just said it too. I didn't bring it up, so with the trellis is still hanging out there. I can add that. Can the trellis come? But I thought the way I left it off of there, trellis is coming back, and it was asked of Scott, can you bring trellis back? And he nodded. So I just.
That's true, but it would be clean if you put it as part of the motion.
And trellis to come back.
Thank you.
Seconder is fine with that. Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Thank you. There must be that time delay.
Is that good?
And is there any interest in giving direction to staff about potentially coming back with a new ordinance? A new initiative. Yeah, it's not an initiative. What do I?
Cleaned up for the ballot? What do you want?
Ballot language for a future change to the structure of Measure S. Is that something we want to entertain in the next year or two?
I think it's, and can we look at Measure S in the next year or two?
Okay, good enough.
Understood. And Supervisor Madrone, unless you say you're not happy with that, I assume you're happy with that?
Yes.
Happy as clams.
Good. All right. So anything else, or are we ready to go? I see, Alicia, you have your hand on the, did you want to say something?
I was going to propose a motion.
One that actually encompasses it all?
Yeah.
Lovely.
I would propose a motion to suspend tax payments for cultivation years 2022, billed in 2023, and cultivation year 2023, billed in 2024, to defer all outstanding payments until October 2023, with a waiver of penalties on installments that were due October of 2022, and with enforcement occurring following the payment in October of 2023 for any outside taxes owed, and return with recommendations to modify Project Trellis, which would address the penalty situation that you all were chewing on.
And the ballot language, go ahead.
And it would be just those ones that were due October 15th, 2022. So people haven't already paid those, correct?
Yes, and I confirmed with the tax collector that they have not yet assessed any penalties for the October payment because they were pending the outcome of today. So that would be equitable for anybody who might have paid and those who have not yet paid.
I thought that's what I said. Anyway, yeah. That's fine
Okay.
with that. And to look at in the next 24 months, maybe Measure S wording.
And to return for discussions on potential modifications
Yeah.
to Measure S through a ballot initiative.
Second. No, Ada first.
All right. I'm not hearing Supervisor Madrone say he's not okay with that, so,
And bring back trellis.
and bring back trellis. All right. Everyone clear? Okay. I think we're ready, Nikki.
Okay. Let's see, Supervisor Bone.
No, yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
No.
Supervisor Bass.
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-1.
All right, so can we take like a short